This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Well, folks, I got a lot on the docket for today, as you could probably tell by the title. A series of ups and downs we will be discussing. It is WrestleMania weekend, baby. There's a lot to talk about. There's also a lot of sleep that I'll need to be catching up on in the next few days. They never get any shorter, do they? Premium live specials for modern WWE. If you can stretch it out for 8 hours, why not? Better yet, let's go 12. If you're actually stupid enough to watch all the pre-show content. We'll get into all that. We also have a Retro Raw show on the docket as well. So we are jam-packed to the rafters here today, folks. Factoring in that I will probably have a few stragglers and new viewers watching today. Just want to take this opportunity to do a few show plugs. This is the Five Starr Wrestling Report channel. If you're watching here on YouTube, cool. You can also check us out on Rumble if you prefer secondary content platforms. I think it's picking up steam, that Rumble streaming site. It'll be the new thing in the next several years. Bank on that. But we are on both platforms, and I'd appreciate your support on both channels. Make sure you subscribe if you're here on YouTube. In the case of both, you can like the video, comment, all that good stuff. Rumble, whatever their version of liking content is, they have a Rumble button you can smash there. All the good stuff. And we're on Mondays and Fridays. We talk about classic wrestling, modern wrestling. We are, well, at least we try to do our best to keep things interesting. I don't always succeed, but I give it the old college try. I try to make this one entertaining because there's plenty of material to cover. Since this is already going to be a very long show, what do you say we dive into things? WrestleMania 39, baby. Here we go. And here to kickstart things and really set the mood for the occasion, what better way to begin WrestleMania than with multi-platinum global recording artist Becky G out to sing America the Beautiful. Becky G. Never heard of her. And her performance was mid. As were the majority of these celebrity appearances on this show. Aside from the fact that I'm just very outdated and I have no idea who half these celebs are anymore, every single one of them is a talentless hack to begin with. In the case of these so-called musicians, they have their live performances auto-tuned anyway, so how can you really judge their skill fairly? You know, it's funny, we just reviewed WrestleMania 10 on this channel a couple weeks ago. To think we've gone from Little Richard singing America the Beautiful to now we got some chick named Becky G. Those are the modern artists, huh? The ones that record companies are plunking out huge amounts of money to sign to deals. Sad times. But boy, it makes me so much more grateful I gave up on pop culture a long time ago. But we're here to talk about the professional wrestling aspect of things, not the simulated sports entertainment garbage. So as advertised, our opening bout on night one, it's the United States Championship match. Austin Theory, the defending champion, going up against Challenger, the propagandized artificial paper goat of the WWE, Mr. Jonathan Felix Anthony Cena. Was Cena pulling the ultimate trump card for the occasion here, telling Vince McMahon, I'll work WrestleMania, but you're putting me on first so I can get in and get out, brother. And we're making sure the match goes 10 minutes flat. And Cena's definitely seen better cardio in his days. Just leave it at that. And obviously, when it comes to Cena, they're going to do everything to blow up their corporate agenda, make the guy look like the most beloved babyface of all time. So he comes out at the start. He's got all the Make-A-Wish kids surrounding him. And it's supposed to be this warm, heartfelt attempt at making me admire Cena for all of his charity work over the years. Meanwhile, after a decade of watching this fucking jagoff get rammed down my throat, with all of WWE's washy corporate spins on the presentation of him being a good guy, all it does is make me loathe him that much more for all the horrible business he did and failing to create new stars or elevate guys up the card, especially when he was in the prime of his career as a full-time athlete. A couple funny little triggering comments early on from Michael Cole, because you all know Cole likes to bring up his stats. And of course, he's citing the last two occasions that John Cena wrestled for the United States title at WrestleMania and won. Do you remember who his two opponents were? Allow for me to refresh your memory. Big Show and Rusev. I laughed so hard at that. Oh boy. Big Show and Rusev. And where are those guys now? Exactly. Yeah, Cena really did a stellar job in that Rusev program, didn't he? Beat him 3 straight times in a row and killed his career dead. And the guy never recovered. Thanks for that one, John. You fucking douche. You're probably sitting there wondering to yourself right about now. Not a Cena fan, I see. Well, you'd be correct. I wonder what could have given that away. But as we get to the actual match, since I already spent about 5 minutes ranting about how much of a piece of crap John Cena is, honestly, that was probably more interesting than anything that actually happened in the match. To be fair, and again, you'll have to pardon my lack of knowledge when it comes to the build for this program. I don't watch Raw, and it looks like the entire build to this feud has primarily been done on the Monday show. I didn't see any of the promo bouts or anything between the guys. I heard Cena kind of left Theory's balls to shrivel up and dry out after skewering him on the microphone. I think I read or heard somewhere that Cena was actually Theory's favorite wrestler growing up as a kid, as a shoot. So, I guess you could say this was a special moment for Theory. Getting to wrestle his childhood hero at WrestleMania. It was probably a cool moment for him. So, I get the idea of wanting to do a match like this. But I even remember saying in that preview to this thing that I can't imagine they would actually put Cena over here unless they plan on extending the program out to SummerSlam. And again, judging by everything they did in the match here, I don't think they would have left enough room for growth to even get to SummerSlam. Because after this was over, I don't know about you, but I really had no desire to see a rematch. Of course, it doesn't get any more classic watching a John Cena match and hearing him blatantly calling spots so even the hard cam can pick it up. God, they may as well just attach a mic on clip to his fucking jorts. so we can all hear him call headlock, tackle, drop down, hip toss. It's ridiculous. His STF submission still sucks too. All those years using that move, and he still applies all the pressure forward instead of wrenching back on the guy. Because, he sucks. But aside from Cena still being a horrible professional wrestler, which is nothing new, again, if the idea was to make this an Austin Theory showcase, did it really succeed at the end of the day? I mean, Theory looked fine in there, but after it was over, I couldn't really recall any of the key notable spots that happened, outside the finish maybe. And even the finish was kind of lackluster in execution. Cena goes to do his usual 5 moves of doom, 2 shoulder blocks, side slam, 5 knuckle shuffle, and right as he goes for the AA, Theory tries to grab the ropes. I believe Michael Cole's exact quote was, "Can you feel Cena coming?" To which I said, "No. No, I don't. And I'm more than okay with that." And after Cena pulls Theory off, they end up doing a ref bump in the opening match of the fucking pay-per-view. That pissed me off more than anything. But Cena ends up trapping Theory in the STF for the visual tap out, but the ref's down, so he can't call for the bell. So as Cena goes to get Theory back to his feet, boom, groin shot, and Theory hits his version of the TKO. I always forget the name of it. And he gets the 1, 2, 3. So, I mean, there are definitely ways to analyze this match and think, well, certainly this couldn't have been the blow-off. I mean, they surely opened the door for a possibility of doing a rematch if they so chose. Again, do I really want to see it? Not really. Even when Theory won at the end, it really didn't give the oh shit vibes. Like, Theory just pinned one of the alleged all-time greats in the opening match at WrestleMania. That's amazing. Instead, it was like, okay, he beat John Cena. Okay, cool. Big deal. I mean, it's not like Cena's around full-time anymore. We all kind of figured he was just riding in to pick up a paycheck, do a quick job, and get out. Did the win really do all that much for Theory at the end of the day? I don't know. It's debatable. What do they do with Theory after the fact? That's what's going to ultimately define whether or not this match really meant anything for his career. If they keep elevating him up the card and don't book him like a jag-off like they've been doing for the better part of the last year, then he'll at least have something to boast about on TV. But I don't think we should hang our hat just because he beat John Cena. So don't put any more stock into it other than that. Watch the aftermath. See what comes of it. That's the key takeaway. All right. So, serious question. Before I get into the next thing on the card here. And I am asking this genuinely. I want to know the answer. What the fuck is a global ambassador position for the WWE? And why does Titus O'Neil have that title? I'm just curious. I mean, I know he's a company guy and he basically has a guaranteed job for life, but it's like Joe Biden bringing in Pete Buttigieg as the chief secretary of transportation. The fuck kind of qualifications did Buttigieg ever have to obtain a position like that? Aside from the fact that he's gay. It's like Titus O'Neil being WWE's global ambassador. What are his qualifications? I mean, I spend more time focusing on that question than I did paying attention to anything in this four-way tag free-for-all. Hey, you watch my preview? I said I was going to have a designated piss break on the card, and I chose the four-way because see every rant I've ever done on this channel about hating multi-person matches in wrestling. I just didn't expect this to be the second match on the card. I thought this would be way later on in the show. I did leave the audio rolling while I was out doing a few other things. And at one point I walked back in the room, and the first thing I heard was Titus O'Neil asking, and I quote, "Why is Otis sweaty for no reason?" And that statement alone was enough to pop both me and Michael Cole. Most people, I think, expected it just to be a spot fest, and that's evidently what it ended up becoming. You know, I did catch a few of the replay highlights after the match, and aside from seeing Braun Strowman get barreled over by Dawkins, which is awesome, since I hate that fucking running spot Strowman does on the floor, you know, it was good to see someone finally just run him down like a brick wall. I also saw Ricochet's gravity-defying shooting star press where I think he legitimately managed to pause himself in the air while flipping himself over and landing on his feet. It was quite impressive. That guy really gives the Beta Bucks a run for their money in terms of all the batshit aerial stunts he can do in his matches. I mean, he looked more impressive than that El Hijo del Vikingo guy. And I'll say this. You know, the spot fest flippy stuff isn't for me, but when it comes to Ricochet, at least his aerial stuff fits within the confines of a wrestling match, and it's not just endless nonstop gymnastic tumbling routines for no reason. It's probably why he's better off in the WWE, because if he went to AEW, all hands on deck. Lord knows what that guy would be doing. He'd be in a fucking iron lung by now. The other spot I heard people raving about was the deal where Chad Gable gave Strowman the deadlift German suplex. For whatever reason, they chose not to show that on the replay, even though it's what people were talking about the most coming out of it. So I unfortunately did not get a chance to see that spot, but I'm sure it's all over YouTube by now, so I'll probably find it while I'm browsing the internet sitting on the toilet or something. But that's my review of the Fatal 4-Way Showcase Tag Team Turmoil thing. I mean, they couldn't get me to sit through the men's version of it on night one, so spoiler alert for what's about to come when we get the women's showcase on night two. But I ended up sitting back in my chair right around the time they started airing the promo package for Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul. A match where, again, the majority of the build was happening on Raw, so I had minimal knowledge about what was going on in this feud prior to all the videos here. And, you know, I had seen a couple of the things they shot on the premium live specials, like the Royal Rumble, where Logan threw Seth out of the match, and the Elimination Chamber thing, where Logan basically cost Rollins the match. Goddamn, though. I didn't realize how much Logan was getting the one-up over Seth in most of this program. It looks like the entire setup was Logan laying out Seth in some form or fashion on every TV show. I'm not kidding. Like, every time I saw something where Rollins and Logan were interacting in the ring together, the final shot was Logan punching Rollins and knocking his lights out. There's Rollins laying there in dead man's position. So by that logic alone, if Seth didn't go over in this match, God, what a jackass he would have turned out to be by the end. I like the little zipline thing Logan rode in on. You know, that's an obvious tribute to Shawn. And yeah, that did look kind of sick, especially in that venue. He had the headpiece on with a microphone too, so he was cutting the promo while they were lowering him down to the aisleway. That was the point where I realized that Logan was supposed to be the heel in this thing, and Seth was supposed to be the babyface. Which I could have been fine with if Seth Rollins didn't have go-away heat with me at this point. And it's not even so much Seth Rollins, the guy, that has the go-away heat with me. It's the WWE version of him that has go-away heat with me. Like, I've officially deemed Seth's theme music the single worst theme music of all time. As a music connoisseur slash semi-professional musician with a composition degree, the fact that all it takes to please people in music anymore is by getting 70,000 people to sing the same 3 notes over and over again, that offends me. All that fucking training and listening and studying I did in school, and all I ever had to do was walk over to a keyboard and play A, F, and E natural in that order. Could have made fucking millions. I mean, let's just be blunt. The music is more over than whatever Seth's ridiculous gimmick is supposed to be. I still have no idea. What is his character? Does anybody know? Aside from being an annoying, nasally douchebag? Well, in any case, looking past the whole Rollins gimmick, here's what I will say about this match. Logan Paul has been one of the biggest surprises in the last couple of years. You know, last year they had him doing that thing with The Miz that I really wasn't all that fond of. But as soon as they broke him away from all that nonsense and started featuring him on his own, started booking him as a more traditional chicken cowardly heel on television, man, that guy really stood out. That title match he had with Roman last year in Saudi Arabia, that was one of my favorite Roman matches I had seen in a long time. You know, even though the build for it wasn't really all that good on television and they were trying their damnedest to present Logan Paul as a babyface, even though the fans booed him vociferously, probably because he has such a punchable face. But I'm telling you, when it came time for Logan to deliver, he was on his game. He's not disappointed yet. And while the idea of him and Rollins didn't really leave me all that eager to see, you know, I've watched enough of Rollins' matches now to know that, again, despite the bad gimmick, the guy's an amazing athlete, and he usually delivers in the big matches. And I ended up being pleasantly surprised here. You know, my expectations weren't all that high from the beginning, but they winded up piecing together a really good match by the end. You know, discounting a couple gripes that I'll get into in a little bit. It did take a little bit to get going. You know, they had Rollins getting overwhelmed early on. Logan was being a good heel, getting Rollins frustrated and trying to get under his skin. Then he goes to do that really impressive moonsault deal where he basically leaps up without having to grab onto the ropes, lands perfectly with his 2 feet placed on the top turnbuckle. There's a great back rotation and ends up eating shit on the mat once Rollins moved out of the way. I've seen both him and Pat McAfee do that spot where they basically springboard from the ring up to the top turnbuckle with only their feet and nothing else. I forget what they call that in sports. It's basically like a lunge. I've never seen any other athlete in modern times do that, with the exception of those two. I mean, maybe someone in AEW's done it, but I mean, their name's escaping me at the moment. It hasn't been all that memorable. You know, and of course, Rollins took over for a while, gave Logan the 3 suicide topes out to the floor. They ended up doing a spot where he curb stomped Logan's hand onto the ring steps, and yeah, they did that as a heat angle to injure his hand, so Logan couldn't execute the knockout punch to full effect. Turns out that bit him in the ass later on when he actually got the punch on Rollins, but, you know, he was selling the hand, so he couldn't make the cover in good time, so, of course, Rollins kicked out at 2. And at this point, I'm thinking, man, this is going along great. It's a great fight feel. The crowd's giving Logan a hard time here. Rollins is a great sympathetic babyface in all this. This is shaping up to be a relatively good match. And then, of course, they had to get too cute with all the mascot bullshit. And they had a guy come out at the start of this thing. He was in one of those energy drink outfits. I guess it's a sponsor of Logan's podcast or something. I don't know what the brand is. It's like one of those goofball Whole Foods-like brands. It's supposed to be allegedly healthy for you, but it's probably not, because all of Whole Foods' knockoff brands are just as garbage as the regular known brands. Regardless, turns out that the guy under the costume was KSI, who I swore to God on first viewing, I thought it was R-Truth. Wouldn't that have been perfect? An R-Truth cameo at WrestleMania 39. But no. No, we were informed the man's name was KSI. And you might be asking yourself, if you're the average American, who is KSI? Aside from Logan Paul's friend? Well, according to our so-called experts, he's apparently another social media YouTube sensation. Because everybody's a social media sensation these days. It's kind of the fad. No one knows how to change a fucking tire or how to weld. But goddamn it all, everyone knows how to use the Twitch and the Twatch and the tweets and the twits. Am I allowed to say that on YouTube? I don't give a shit. So that part sucked a dick. We did get a payoff at the end, though, as Logan went to set Rollins on the announce desk, and KSI was about to live stream Logan doing the big stage dive onto the announce table. But Rollins pulled KSI onto the table while Logan was mid-jump, which is actually really good timing when you think about the planning that had to go into making that work, making sure everybody was in the right position to pull that spot off. So Logan goes crashing through the desk and kills the mascot. He at least had a nice cushion to pad the landing. And then Seth threw Logan back in the ring and hit a pedigree for a 2 count, which I kind of shook my head at. Like, really? You had to have Logan kick out of that? Just so they could do more stuff for a few minutes and then have Seth win with a curb stomp? Whatever. It is kind of funny how they, completely killed the pedigree spot. Remember for years that used to be a finish to a match? Now it's just a spot. It's a transition move that everybody kicks out of. Kind of like how the pile driver's a move that everybody kicks out of now. It's always got to be a hat on a hat, doesn't it? Perfect time to go home after that KSI angle on the floor, but of course they got to go an extra 3 minutes because everybody's got to get their shit in. So Seth won, which sucked because I meant I had to hear that god-awful music a second time in the chorus of the Oh, I'm sorry, I got to go to verse 2. Here we go. Oh. So that forever shattered my fucking eardrums. But all seriousness, remove my hatred of the angle with the energy drink mascot. This was a fun match. Seth going over was probably the right call. That guy's been on a pretty spotty booking track record since they had him job out 3 times to Cody last year. He's needed something to bounce him back up the card again and give him a little bit of credibility to his name. And while this didn't really seem to do all that much for Logan, at least in terms of setting him up for any big showcase matches down the road, I mean, you never know. For all we know, they could have Logan come back and fuck over Rollins right as they're setting him up for a Universal title match later in the year. Maybe right around SummerSlam time, and they have Logan come back at the live special before that pay-per-view and kickstart things again with Rollins. Could be an option. Now that I've seen these guys actually have moderately decent chemistry together, I could go for a round 2. Why not? Yeah, it means I'm going to have to hear people go, oh. And that's bad times. But I don't know. This ended up being a positive takeaway for me, though. Discount Rollins' garbage theme music. You know what wasn't a positive takeaway? So, confession time. I lied. I said my piss break match on the card was going to be the four-way tag match. And I did leave the room. But I didn't actually have to go to the bathroom at that point. So I just kind of walked out of the room and did a few other things. But it was during this next match that I chose to drain the cow. Because up next on the card was Damage Control versus Becky Lynch, Trish Stratus, and Lita. And this is no offense to anybody involved. You know, I actually happen to like a lot of the female talent that was associated in this match. But this show is already long, and the whole Damage Control thing has been a complete waste of investment, particularly for Bayley. Again, maybe I'm in the minority, disgruntled wrestling fan talking, guilty as charged. But I really didn't have much of a desire to see Lita or Trish wrestle. Didn't mind seeing Lita or Trish, but seeing them wrestle, wasn't really feeling that. The only thing I'll say about it, and again, this all goes back to the Becky thing. You can say what you want, and you'll obviously get a lot of different perspectives on this depending on who you ask. And you know I'm very highly critical of a lot of women's wrestling, especially in the modern age. But 3 or 4 years ago, Becky Lynch was one of the hottest baby faces in this company, period. Male or female. You know, when Becky took off as an attraction, she did monumental business for WWE at one point. And then, of course, there was the pregnancy thing, and she went away for a year, came back. I think it was at SummerSlam a couple years ago, right? That was one of the first WWE events I think we reviewed on the FSWR channel. Remember, didn't she show back up as a surprise and beat Bianca in like 30 seconds for the belt? And they tried to turn her heel and everybody shat on it because they all wanted to cheer her. Well, since that point, from the time Becky came back from maternity leave to where we are now in April of 2023, to think that this was the best option they could come up with for Becky Lynch to feature her on the card, using her as a bit player in what probably could have once been viewed as a top-of-the-hour TV match on Raw, shoehorning her into a 6-person tag to wrestle Damage Control. That was their big game plan for Becky Lynch, huh? One of their hottest female attractions in the modern era. I don't know, dude. I mean, last year at Mania, wasn't that the rematch with her and Bianca from the deal they shot at the SummerSlam the previous year? I think Bianca won that match, if I'm not mistaken, right? I mean, all this stuff starts to blur together so much over the years, but I mean, this wasn't that long ago. Since that point, it's been a year. What have they done with Becky Lynch on television? I mean, I'm primarily asking this question for anybody that's been watching Raw consistently, but has she been involved with anything remotely interesting? Again, I only follow SmackDown, and to my recollection, I don't remember the last time I saw Becky appear on SmackDown in any capacity. Certainly not to wrestle a match. She maybe made like 1 or 2 appearances, but I don't know, dude. You know, but she certainly doesn't have the big feel of a main event star like she once did. And I know I've been highly critical of WWE's presentation of the female roster because it's been the same women being force-fed into the same spots over and over again for years now. But Becky was always the standout in terms of main roster presentation 3 or 4 years ago. People used to react big for her segments. Now she's just kind of another cog in the wheel. You know, she got a WrestleMania slot this year, but it was just wedged in the middle of night one as a throwaway with 5 other girls. And even seeing her name appear on the graphic, it wasn't enough to keep me in the room to sit down and watch this. Sorry to say, but that's just the reality of the situation. I believe Becky, Lita, and Trish won, which is kind of predictable. And again, the whole Damage Control group really hasn't done anything for anybody. You know, this thing's been going on for as long as Hunter was put in charge of overseeing creative like a year and a half ago. And if this was one of his brain trust ideas, to pair Bayley with Io and Dakota and basically do jack all of nothing with them as a faction for over a year, well, I don't think we can necessarily call Hunter Mr. Booker of the Year either, can we? So after that, we had this Rey and Dom Mysterio match, which by far, hands down, had the best production out of anything on the entire show. I laughed my ass off during this video and Dom's entrance. We also had to relive the classic angle where Dom got arrested on Rey's property on Christmas Eve and got that great line where he's sitting in the back of the cop car. Mommy, bail me out. I won't make it in jail. An epic, horribly acted delivery, which is why it was so fucking great. They put that in there on purpose because they knew people would get a kick out of it. And we get this awesome entrance for Dom. They show the footage of him getting escorted out of the correctional facility, you know, loading him off into the van and being offloaded at the building with handcuffs. And, of course, the fucker's got a Rey mask on. You know, Rey had a great entrance, too. I like the homage to Eddie when he came out on the lowrider with Snoop Dogg. Like, they really went all out with the production value on this thing. Did it feel a little artificial at times? Yeah. And normally I'm usually not down for that kind of stuff, but they didn't half-ass this thing. And that kind of set a high bar from the beginning, because then Rey and Dom had to go in there and wrestle the match. It was going to have a tough time following the whole introduction they gave it. That was a big old pomp and circumstance fanfare. You know, we'll talk about the match in a minute, but I do have to ask, though. Considering the supposed gravity of this family rivalry, did anyone else think it was incredibly off-putting seeing the Cinnamon Toast Crunch logos on the LED boards? I had a hard time taking anything seriously at that point. Like, I know WWE's got to get their sponsor plugs in, whether it's the cereal brands or the Mountain Dew Pitch Black. Funny how you never hear WWE mention anything about that anymore. After that Bray Wyatt debacle at the Rumble, I don't blame him. But, like, seeing all the wacky cartoon characters on the screen while Rey and Dom are supposed to be having this serious fight, it was a little pitchy for me. But I'll say this about the match, specifically when it comes to Dom. He earned my respect by the end of this thing. I was a little on the fence going into the match. You know, I was worried he was going to let the butterflies get the better of him. There was a lot of pressure going in for him to deliver here. And while he's still very new and green in the business, I thought he did a tremendous job in there with Rey. You know, he threw in some smoke and mirror angles to break up the flow. There was a tad of clunkiness with the wrestling here and there at times. You know, spots where they tried some stuff and it didn't come off great. You know, especially by the end when Dom was getting a little fatigued and Rey had to work a little extra hard to bump and get Dom's stuff over. But, you know, I like the stuff with the leather strap early on. Rey whipping and spanking Dom in the corner with it. That got a big pop. And like a minute later, he goes out to the floor and throws the cup of water in his sister's face at ringside. That was a good heat spot. You know, I think everyone popped for the spot where Dom tried to badmouth his mom again and she ended up slapping him in the face. Yes, in plain sight of the referee, which somehow did not result in a DQ. I also question how security was not immediately in there to throw her out of the building for laying her hand on a wrestler, even if it was her son. But it's pro wrestling logic for you. And again, the little side angles were definitely essential to cover up for Dom's weaknesses. Having him work long matches, especially as a singles guy right now, it can be a little bit dodgy. So I was okay with all the woo-woo magic trickery they were doing here. Somewhere during this, Damian Priest and Finn Balor just sort of randomly appeared at ringside with little fanfare. Like, at one point I'm watching Ray and Dom do spots, and the next thing I know, here's Priest just walking into the frame nonchalantly, and then Balor's on the other end of the ring. And on the night where WWE officials just slacked off and stopped giving a fuck about being fair and objective, what does the ref do upon seeing Priest and Balor hang out at ringside? Well, nothing. Just stands there and lets them hang out. Apparently figuring they were probably out there to donate to the Red Cross or something. Like good Samaritans. Not cause any havoc like typical heels would. So strategically, Priest ends up removing his jacket and conveniently places it in the corner of the ring. Probably just because it was warm in the building and he totally wasn't trying to conceal a weapon of any kind. So, of course, that brought out the Legado lackeys, and they all come out wearing the Latino World Order shirts, which gave me PTSD. God. Of all the failed WCW gimmicks to rehash. But, no, as expected, the chaos ensued with everyone. Bodies are strewn all over ringside. Dom ended up hitting Ray with a 619 frog splash combo, but that only got a 2 count, and the people pop for that. And I did like the finish. You had to figure with Bad Bunny being out there at the Spanish commentary desk, I mean, he was bound to get involved somehow. I mean, if he wasn't helping Ray win, he was turning heel and siding with the Judgment Day. Like, one or the other was going to happen. And it would appear, at least for the time being, that Bad Bunny has not chosen the dark side. So Dom ends up trying to grab the chain from Priest's coat pocket, but as he goes to wrap it around his wrist, here runs in Bad Bunny, and he steals the chain away from him. And that set up Ray perfectly so he could drop kick Dom into the ropes, hit him with the 619, Eddie Frog Splash, 1, 2, 3. Good finish. Crowd erupted for it. Up to and including all of Germany, who were apparently watching this take place at 4:20 in the morning. That is some real devotion right there, people. Wrestling fans staying up until 4:30 in the morning to watch Rey Mysterio beat his own son. Takes some real passion to muster up the energy to put yourself through that. And again, much like the Logan Paul Seth Rollins match, this was a pleasant surprise too. In a good way. Again, I was a little anxious about how this would all come off in execution, but I thought both guys did a really, really nice job here. The actual match itself wasn't the cleanest. A couple hiccups here and there in terms of spots, but as a whole, they made it work. And the crowd went ballistic when Ray got the big win at the end. I don't necessarily know where that leaves Dom right now. Seeing Ray get the clean win at the end here, kind of left poor Dom to hang out and dry. I presume there will be a continuation of this program. The Judgment Day thing's been on life support since the day they kicked Edge out of the group over a year ago. So by WWE logic, that means they can milk this thing for another 6 to 8 months. I expect they'll try to get Bad Bunny involved, factoring in his connection at the finish with helping Ray win. I could see them doing a Ray and Bad Bunny versus Dom and Priest or Dom and Balor tag match. Not really something I'm clamoring to see particularly, but, as an attraction match, it would be something to hold people's attention. But that's for another time. Well, they made the right call. I was very skeptical about what they would decide to main event night 1. It was a toss-up between this match and the tag title match. Thankfully, divine intervention came through for me here. They put the Charlotte Flair Rhea Ripley title match first. And that was a very wise move on their part. You know, especially with the way they laid this out and the fact that the crowd took a long time to get into it. Whereas you compare that with the main event, which we'll talk about in a bit, and it was a whole different vibe in the room. The reception to everything that happened in that match from start to finish. And man, if you all want further indication as to why Charlotte Flair's a fucking rotten babyface, the crowd reaction for her pretty much said it all here. The entirety of this match could probably be summed up with the following tagline. If Charlotte wins, we riot, bitch. And you probably wouldn't have been wrong. And I said going into this match, regardless of how good or bad it was, the only thing I was going to judge the match by was the finish. If Rhea went over and won the belt, great. But if Charlotte retained and they went out of their way to bury Rhea for a second straight occasion in a WrestleMania match with Charlotte, boy, I was fixating on motherfucking everything about this. They were just daring me to find an excuse to crap all over her. Was the match good? It was mid. It was long. God, it was incredibly fucking long. And long doesn't necessarily equate to it being great. If AEW's ever showed that, I don't know what does. And again, the dynamics of everything were completely off in the beginning because Charlotte's a loathsome, hateable fucking personality and everything about her just screams condescending dirtbag. And of course, she was supposed to be the babyface in all this. Meanwhile, everyone in Satan's wanting to root for Rhea because we all know about WWE's hidden agenda for years with trying to ram Charlotte down our throats as the greatest female wrestler of all time. And we all know it's bullshit. Always has been. I've said countless times, name me one Charlotte match you've ever seen where she doesn't visibly botch something or fuck up a spot so horribly that everybody in God notices it. There were plenty of them here. You know, the spot where Rhea threw Charlotte overhead with that German throw and she basically came down landing flat on her face because Charlotte had to take a flip bump, but she couldn't execute it because she sucks. Or the spot where Rhea threw Charlotte off the top rope and damn near killed her with the German because Charlotte had to take a flip bump, but she couldn't because she sucks. Or how about that blind moonsault she does every year at WrestleMania where she comes nowhere close to actually making contact with a person on the floor? I mean, if we're going to rake Adam Page over the coals for doing that same move, I ain't going to withhold doing the same to Charlotte. It sucks either way. And so does Charlotte. Catching on to the theme yet? But of course, everybody's going to rave about how awesome this was because they kicked out of everything in the book. We talk about it all the time. That's what the WWE fans are trained and educated to care about. Kickouts, false finishes, high-impact moves. That's how you please a modern wrestling crowd in 2023. Meanwhile, they just sit on their hands for the rest of the match in complete silence. Unless it's something involving Sami Zayn and the Bloodline. And in that case, it's like watching the Attitude Era all over again. Of course, after Rhea goes over, the heel in this scenario, well, of course, the people all blow a gasket and shit themselves. They're just beyond elated that the villain overcame the odds and conquered the babyface. Clean, by the way. And admittedly, it was a cool moment for Rhea. You know, she got to pose with the title and that badass getup. She looked like a megastar. The people treated her as such. That was all great. Seriously, I have no complaints about the finish. That was absolutely the right call. And just because they had to stick it to me, They had to make sure they put the camera on Charlotte to show her smiling and no-selling everything on the floor after the fact. The fucking egomaniacal twit that she is. Yeah, let me just hang out at ringside here and laugh it all off. Oh, Rio won. Oh well, no big deal. I'm still Charlotte, so fuck you. I know I'm better. Cocksucker. But congrats to Rhea Ripley. Job well done. Should have been the finish from 3 years ago. Better late than never. This was a solid women's title match. Definitely better than average. Again, the right call was made for Rhea to go over, but I'm going to stand by everything I've ever complained about with a Charlotte Flair match. Fuck everything about WWE's incessant nature of trying to prop her up as the GOAT. She's horrible, and she always has been. Never forget. You won't hear it from anybody else but me. So naturally, because the show was already running long, and we were about 4 hours in by this point, what we desperately needed at this point was more filler. Ample enough time for us to get an impromptu Pat McAfee Miz match. After a few tiny balls chants. Because we're all mature here. Yeah, because that's what everyone was really clamoring for. 4 hours and something minutes into this fiasco. The fucking Miz. That's what we all wanted to see. Yeah. Surely not a way to keep people from making a beeline to the nearest food stand. Or commode. And even with the people that stayed to watch this thing, I mean, even they really didn't seem to give a rat's ass about it. Can't blame them. What was the point of this? I mean, it was a complete waste of a Pat McAfee appearance. After all that classic stuff they did with him at last year's WrestleMania with Vince, him getting stunned by Austin, just so they could turn around a year later and throw him into this? Complete waste of an angle. It was dumb. And I like Pat McAfee, but no, we didn't need this. Just didn't really feel this. But hey, small praise where we can get it. At least it didn't involve Baron Corbin. But finally, we arrived at the main event of night one. And I just realized in saying that I have to report on a whole other card after we get finished with this. And I'm already drained of life. But we're going to power through this one. And this was absolutely the right choice. I cannot harp on this enough. Main eventing night one with the Usos defending their undisputed tag titles against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Nothing else on the card was going to top this. In terms of energy level, crowd reaction, story build, and match delivery. In it, much like the women's title match, yes, this got a lot of time. And yes, it did basically wind up turning into one of those modern main event style matches where guys hit every big finisher in the book and kick out of everything. A little excessive at times, yeah. And probably my biggest gripe about the match is I don't think I ever need to see a super kick in my entire life ever again, especially not from the Usos. I already see enough thigh slapping on the other station, but Jimmy and Jay give the other guys a run for their money sometimes. But in terms of the layout, this was all about the culmination. It was all about the finish. And while I know I made some snide comments about the possibility of Owens fucking over Sammy at the end here and siding with the Bloodline, it was a facetious comment. I wasn't actually advocating for a Russo swerve, especially if they were going to go with the decision of having this main event night one. Like, Sammy and Owens had to win. No question. And let me say this about Sami Zayn. You've all heard my SmackDown reports. You know that I've been a big proponent of Sammy for a very long time in WWE. I've been vocal about it. I never really liked the El Generico character in Ring of Honor. I thought it was too niche and way too aimed at the hardcore smart mark crowd. But I think a lot of us forget just how over Sami Zayn used to be when he first came to NXT and they started giving him that monster push in developmental as the underdog babyface. Remember that was like right around the time where they were kind of following a similar format on the main roster with Bryan Danielson, and the smart crowd kind of hijacked those shows and forced WWE's hand into giving Bryan that world title run. Remember that was right around the same time in NXT where they were basically doing the same story with Sami Zayn. The only difference was that Sammy wasn't a masked mute gimmick anymore. They actually had the guy cutting believable babyface promos, and he was a relatable, blue-collar common man. He was a great underdog. Some of those matches he had with Owens back in the day, the stuff he did with Samoa Joe for a brief period. Remember that match he had with Shinsuke Nakamura at one of the TakeOver shows? I think a lot of people slept on that match. I still remember it. Him and Balor did some good business together. As much as they've jerked him around on the main roster for years, even as early as last year, go back and listen to my WrestleMania 38 report. It's on the channel right now. You all know how much I blasted that stupid match he had with that goofball celebrity. The hell was that guy's name? Johnny Knoxville, I think. They had that trashy comedy hardcore match, and it just buried Zayn and made him look like a bumbling buffoon. Like, fuck that shit. That's stupid. This was the Sami Zayn I've been waiting for the better part of 8 years to see, in a main roster capacity. Not getting jobbed out, not getting made to look like a bumbling jackass, the authentic, serious, button-down, underdog, white meat babyface Sami Zayn. Because that Sami Zayn is great. The comedy stuntman Sami Zayn, the WWE comedy version of him, like that shit sucks. And it always has. And some guys are talented enough where they can defy all the bad booking and they can rise to the occasion and manage to pull their careers out of the water. Sami Zayn's one of those guys. No matter how much they book him into oblivion, no matter how much they job him out, no matter how much they make him look like an idiot, somehow, some way, he manages to stay over. I don't know how he does it, but he has that believability. He has that connection with the fans. And it's why I've been a Sami Zayn fan for all these years. People have run hot and cold with him for a long time, and I was ready to give up on him at one point. Think about how long he's been on the main roster. It's been a long time. And can you really think, aside from the Bloodline stuff, going back prior years when Vince was sort of overseeing things, can you think of a lot of really key, notable Sami Zayn moments on the main roster? There really haven't been that many, if any at all. I really can't think of anything drastic or groundbreaking that they did with Sammy on the main roster. They pulled him from developmental and they brought him up and he just instantly became another guy. He was never factored into anything big. He was just sort of a dude. He hung around for a while and that's all that Vince ever thought of him. And then they started this Bloodline stuff up and they gave this guy the ball and man, he ran with it. I mean, he really, really turned things around for the better. For not just his career, but the entire Bloodline. I mean, I've talked about it before. The Bloodline story with him in the last year, it's been remarkable. It's the best thing I've seen on WWE television in years and years. And everything finally coming full circle to WrestleMania 39. And yeah, it's not Sammy challenging for the top belt like a lot of people wanted. To be fair, I at one point would have probably advocated for Sammy to be factored into the Cody Roman match as well. But the payoff we got here with Sammy coming into WrestleMania Night 1 in the main event, not only finally getting the opportunity to take down the Bloodline, but getting to do so with his longtime best friend for years. What more of a story payoff could you ask for? And Sammy was at peak performance in this match. He's so good and so natural at the underdog babyface selling. Getting beaten down and worked over, fighting from underneath the entire time while the Usos are beating and kicking the living shit out of him. Like, he knows how to take people for that ride. That roller coaster ride of emotions. You know, half the match was Owens standing on the apron playing cheerleader for Sammy while Sammy was in there just getting wrecked by the Usos. You know, they really had the people with a lot of the false finishes, especially by the midway point. The deal where they put Owens through the announce desk and then went back in the ring to hit Sammy with a 1D like a minute later. People thought that was it. And when Sammy kicked out of that thing, everybody leapt to their feet. You know, with the Usos doing more of the trash talking, built nicely to Sammy getting that eventual hot tag. You know, here comes Owens to try and clean shop before things ended up breaking down with all four guys. And this great climactic finish at the end where they kicked Jimmy out of the equation so Sammy could set up Jay in the corner for not one, not two, but 3 consecutive haluva kicks. All of which were great in execution, by the way. And as Jay falls into Sammy's arms, Sammy just kind of looks down and shows no remorse for any of it. All those cathartic kicks, all the crap the Bloodlines put Sammy through, just to finally get to that one moment at the end there where they got a little bit of a receipt. And, you know, you look at the expression on Sammy's face and you probably sense deep down some of those kicks were meant for Roman. Sammy gets the 1, 2, 3. The people fucking erupt for the title switch. Owens and Zayn are in there holding the undisputed belts together. It's, you know what, never mind. I was going to go there with a comment, but I don't think I should. So as not to offend people with triggering comments that might hit home too hard. Hint. I was getting a little bit of the WrestleMania 20 finish vibes at the end there. All right. Did I officially piss off every last viewer watching? Well, on that note, maybe that'd be a good time to take this baby home. But in all seriousness, great match, great finish, great moment in seeing Owens and Zayn hold up the belts together. The only thing that would have made it better was maybe by having Cody Rhodes come out at the end there to raise both guys' hands and kind of embrace them at the end. But, you can't always get perfection. Sometimes you take the good where you can get it. And, you know, it does leave a lot of open door options for Owens and Zayn as the tag team champions going forward. What do you do with them? How long does their title reign last? Who turns on the other this go around? There's a lot of open-ended conversation to be had about it. I've talked about it before. The Usos as the tag champions served its purpose. You know, they beat just about everybody there is to beat. I really didn't see any new fresh matchups for them. And I've already been vocal about my Usos boycott mentality when it comes to their standard tag matches on TV anymore. It's the same match every time. It's dry. I've been over them for a long time now. Like, the story implication with everything in the Bloodline, that's good. I can tolerate those guys on TV in a promo or angle capacity, but when it comes to their matches, I just don't get anything out of them anymore. I've been over them for a really long time. I really would maybe like for this to be a way for them to write them off of TV so I can get a bit of a break, because I think we're all ready for it. For the time being, though, there's plenty you can do with Owens and Zayn on Raw and SmackDown as the champions. So I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing what they do with those guys, where they take them in terms of storylines over the next series of weeks and months to come. Who do you program them with at SummerSlam? Because that's the next Big Four show. Could be interesting. Do you rematch them with the Usos, or do you go in a different direction? I mean, what top heels really exist right now in forms of tag teams in the company? I don't know. I mean, there are options, I guess. But again, I'm actually looking forward to seeing what they do with the tag division, especially in WWE. Can't say the same for AEW at this point. Just as long as the end result isn't Kevin Owens powerbombing Sammy on the ring apron and leaving him for dead, because I don't think we really need to see that again. But all in all, as I recap the first night, I'd say we were off to a good start for WrestleMania 39. The big matches over-delivered in a lot of cases, and the ones that I soured on before they even rang the bell didn't matter anyway because I really didn't pay all that much attention to them. There really wasn't anything rotten or downright abysmal on the card. Everything I saw worked in some form or fashion. And like I said, the stuff that I skipped on, I mean, it didn't hinder my viewing experience because all the bad stuff was basically extracted from memory. Although I think I need to go out of my way to see that Chad Gable throw to Braun Strowman because I'm actually kind of regretting not seeing that now. But I got time. So going right back to where we started with the Night 1 recap, our star celebrity performance of America the Beautiful. And I forgot to write the guy's name down. I actually left the room for a minute while he was singing and didn't take the time to actually read the graphic when they put it up on the screen. He equally sucked too. His performance was actually worse than that Becky G gal. And this geek didn't even have any proper diction. Every time he went for the high notes, he had to take a big gasp for air just to make sure he didn't choke. And to think these are the kinds of musicians that the young cats are actually getting inspiration from. No wonder the music industry's gone to shit. This is why I listen to all the unknown progressive rock artists. Because most of those musicians are actually talented and know how to make proper music. These mainstream juggernauts. God, they're horrible. But in completely unrelated news, looks like John Cena wasn't the only veteran that pulled the curtain jerk card. Brock Lesnar did the same deal with this match with no Moss. He knew WWE did him dirty with this one. So he said, "All right, man, I'll work with Omos, but we're putting this motherfucker on first so we can get it done and over with. Because it's going to be putrid. Better to just do it first and get it out of the way before people start targeting the ring with pitchforks." And I mean that when I refer to him as no Moss. No más, WWE. No más. Por favor. Como se dice, I don't ever want to see No Moss in a featured capacity on a wrestling card for as long as I live. Stop it. I didn't get that far in Spanish when I was in high school. But I do know how to refer to somebody as a blockhead in Spanish. Estúpido. You do the English translation. Because that pretty much describes everything about the Omos experiment in WWE. Estúpido. And you're probably asking, why did this match open the show? Aside from Brock wanting to get it out of the way as quickly as humanly possible. Well, I mean, it was probably a conscious decision. They idiot-proof this thing as much as they could without running off the entire SoFi Stadium, while they still had energy and weren't locked and loaded to turn on the entire show. So here's pretty much everything that happened. Nomos dominated and threw Lesnar around for like 90% of the match. We had a long series of bear hugs and power slams. And then Lesnar caught Nomos with 3 consecutive German throws. He tries for an F5, but the lower back gave out. So Nomos tried for a double-handed chokeslam. Lesnar broke free of that, hit Nomos with a singular F5, and he got the pinfall while the hard cam was zoomed almost all the way out. That was it. That was everything that happened. I mean, I can't even really grade the match on any kind of scale. We all expected that it was going to be a dud. Pretty much met those expectations. By virtue of the fact they kept it so short, I should probably count my blessings while I can. But I go back to everything I said in that preview card I did last week. You know, I've been sour on Brock in WWE for years now. He's not a guy that I really clamor to see wrestle anymore. His matches are always the same boring snooze fest every time. So they always have their work cut out in order to get me to care about anything he's going to be involved with. And again, I just go back to the same question that I asked in the preview portion. I guess it would have been last week's Monday show. But again, the best they could come up with for him was Nomos. Because Vince got a tickle out of it. Yeah. You got the match you probably expected. We'll just leave it at that. Tell you what, though. They were really determined to just tune me out from the onset of this thing. They opened with the Nomos match. And then we got more continuation of the Nomos viewing experience. Because I wanted Nomos of this women's 4-weight showcase match. It was literally an exact carbon copy and paste booking from night 1. Throw in the multi-person match and the second match on the card. The match that I said I was going to dip out on because... I mean, seriously, why the fuck would anybody care about this? Liv Morgan and Raquel Sanchez Gomez Martinez IV, Sonya Deville and Chelsea Green, Natalya and Botchsy, and Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey. Wow. Who on earth would want to watch that? If you're sane and sober and actually value your time, I can't think of any rational reason you would want to check this out. Unless you're just the most diehard loyal fan of women's wrestling, and in that case, you should probably go see somebody. Yeah, it's funny. We were literally just sitting here talking about the complete misuse and mismanagement of Becky Lynch on this year's WrestleMania card. At least I can argue Becky was involved in a showcase match with actual top female talent. This is the epitome of, let's throw every green girl we have under contract into one match and watch them all stink up the joint for 10 minutes. And seeing Ronda be a part of this thing, after all that investment WWE put into her a few years ago, my God. I mean, it's more egregious than the Becky thing. This is really WWE's way of just owning up to the fact that Ronda's been a complete waste of money and financial investment this go-around. But figuring they had to get her on the card somehow, they just said, fuck it, throw her in the multi-girl tag match. Put her in the background for most of it, and then have her go over at the end. I mean, we're paying her big money, so she may as well just get the win. It's not like the match means anything. And they pretty much did that. And the other girls just did a bunch of clunky spots to fill the rest of the time. And then following that, boy, the hits just keep on coming with this thing, don't they? They aired a VTR of Bobby Lashley winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal on the SmackDown Go Home show. Literally so they could just have Lashley come out and hold up the trophy. And then basically dissipate into the void thereafter. All because they couldn't get Lashley on the Mania card to work a match this year, thanks to Bray shenanigans. So, turns out this was their backup plan. Send the guy out there for 60 seconds to hold up a trophy that nobody gives two flying fucks about, and then pitch to the promo package for the upcoming IC title match. Good plan, WWE. So, by this point, we were about an hour or so into the show, and right about laid an egg up to this point. I needed something to pick me back up on my feet, because I was on the verge of falling asleep by this point. And that brought us to the three-way Intercontinental Championship match. It's Gunther versus Sheamus versus Drew McIntyre. Sponsored by Mike's Hard. Because, well, you know. Product placement. Now, I can't think of a better time to do that than by having Sheamus and McIntyre just casually hanging out in the same room together, sharing a cold beverage. Even though they're supposed to be opponents in a match that's happening in T-minus 2 minutes. And to my recollection, they're supposed to hate each other. But no, here they are. Buddy-buddy with one another literally minutes before having to go out there and beat the shit out of each other. But then I'm supposed to buy that these guys are pissed at each other 5 minutes later when they ring the bell to start the match. And let me get this off my chest right now before we even get into anything. Titus O'Neil's commentary. Horrible. The entire time that guy spoke, I was just waiting for someone to grab the hook and pry that guy off the headset. I mean, he already overstayed his welcome on night one, so why he needed to be out there calling a second match the following night beats the hell out of me. And his catchphrase of holy sugar, honey, and sweet tea is not over, for the record. But that's where my griping and bitching about this match ceases. I was dead wrong about this. This match was fucking awesome. You know, all day long before the show began on Sunday, I just kept thinking to myself, man, I'm really kind of dreading this. Like, how much better would this be if it was just a straight singles match with McIntyre and Gunther, or Sheamus versus Gunther, or McIntyre versus Sheamus? And then I saw how they pieced this match together. And, you know what's that catchphrase they always bring up when Sheamus is involved in something? They call it a banger. This was definitely a banger. And this is coming from an avid critic of multi-person matches. I hate three-ways and I hate four-ways with a fiery passion. And I will chant that until the cows come home. Especially in the modern presentation in wrestling, because so many of them are just straight garbage. Just endless moves and nothing but dangerous stunt show spots. That wasn't this match. This was just three grown-ass men pummeling and clubbing and beating the ever-loving teetotal titty fuck out of each other. And it was great. You know, Michael Cole adopting the role of David Crockett in this thing by endlessly laughing at the visual of watching a bunch of guys try to kill each other with chops and slaps and punches. Got me thinking, man, they could have afforded to bring in David Crockett to guest commentate on this thing instead of Titus. It would have lit his face up. David would have loved this fucking match. Guaranteed. I'm serious, man. I'll go on record by saying it now. This might have been the best three-way match I've seen done in wrestling in a long time. These guys worked their asses off. They went in there and they tore the house down. Everything made sense. They didn't do any stacked up stupid plex spots or dangerous dives and bumps out to the floor for no reason. I think McIntyre did one flip senton onto Sheamus on the floor. That was it. The rest of it was just straight ground and pound bar fight wrestling. And it was better for it. You know, one of the things I hate about WWE's layout of multi-man matches is the idea where you got two guys or two girls in the ring doing stuff while everybody else is just sitting on the floor trying to hide under the ring apron, you know, waiting for their cue to run in and break up a pinfall attempt or throw somebody else out of the ring. It's just so formulaic and so dry. But this match had ebb and flow. The crowd was hot for everything they did. I always think the dynamics of a three-way match work better when you have two heels and a babyface. You know, that way the heels can isolate the babyface for the majority of the time and you can have one guy to actually root for. In this case, I think they pulled it off. You know, they already established that McIntyre and Sheamus had beef going in, even though they're both babyfaces. So you could buy those guys had a chip on their shoulder and they weren't going to be forming any kind of alliance the entire time. So it worked. And again, I'm usually not the guy that digs all the big move, kick out spots. Yes, I know it's what the audience has been trained to react to. Just the unfortunate nature of where we are in today's business. But even in a match like this, they didn't overdo it to the point of absurdity. I think they had McIntyre and Sheamus kick out of each other's finisher one time. You know, Gunther wreaked havoc at the end there and caught Sheamus with a big splash while he was trying to pin Drew. From there, Gunther hoisted up Sheamus and powerbombed him onto Drew's upper back. Kind of. Then he picked Drew up, powerbombed him for the 1-2-3. Great. No complaints there. Gunther retaining wasn't all that surprising to me. I think that was kind of predictable. But what I got drastically wrong was my anticipation of how this match was going to go. I really did not have high hopes for this thing, and man, they exceeded my expectations by like triple digits. It still leaves Gunther in the title equation, which is good. You know, I don't think he needs to drop that strap for a long time. Kind of like what they've done with Roman as the champion. The IC title is one of those belts that's been completely neutered over the years because of the hotshot title changes. You know, and the fact the belts meant nothing in decades. Now that they have the strap on a guy that people actually take seriously, why be in a rush to take it off of him, you know? I could see him carrying that thing well into the summer of this year. I mean, I could see them doing a lot of things with Gunther as a champion from now until whenever they decide to take the strap off of him. They could easily do it with someone like a Braun Steiner when he comes up from NXT, or maybe, just maybe, they could put it on Cody. We'll talk more about that later. But like I said, great match, thumbs up, best three-way I've seen in a long time. The only thing that sucked about it was Titus's commentary. Unfortunately, kind of left the girls to piss in the wind for this next match on the card. It's Asuka versus Bianca Belair for the Raw Women's title. And in comparison to the three-way that I just saw, this was like coming down from a high. And listen, I like Asuka. I like Bianca. I happen to think these girls are actually both talented. But there was just no way they were going to be able to follow that three-way. I mean, they could have set themselves on fire during this thing, and it still would have been overshadowed by the previous match. So, well, you'll be shocked to hear that I really didn't dig this one all that much. The other thing that kind of hindered my viewing experience during this was the point where my Peacock app just decided to shit the bed for no reason and stop working. So I had to close the app and reopen it while the match was going on. because, fuck Peacock streaming service. I've said that countless times. That also didn't help matters any. I don't know. Maybe if I watched it again, I would have a different perspective. Possibly. Like I said, Bianca and Asuka have had good showcase matches before. I like Bianca's match last year with Becky. She had that one with Sasha the year before that was really good too. And I'm no Sasha fan. You all know that. And Asuka was one of my favorite female wrestlers to come out of that NXT system. She was better off when they kept her undefeated and didn't serve her up to Charlotte. But I've been over that rant a million times too. I don't want to say the chemistry didn't click here, but there were definitely moments where I was sort of waiting for them to pick things up, and for whatever reason, the match just kind of stalled in first gear for a lot longer than I thought it would. It may just be the downside of trying to stretch girls' matches out to 15 to 20 minutes. And you can all call me sexist for saying that, but tell me straight up. About 90% of the time, what do you think usually turns out for the better? A modern girls match that goes 20 minutes or a modern girls match that goes 8 minutes? And just call it like it is. The blatant calling of spots also got kind of frustrating here. Bianca in particular is still really bad about masking spot calling. I mean, she's as bad as Super Cena. Hope she's not getting her wrestling advice from him. But someone needs to talk to her about that because it's really noticeable in her matches. Like I said, they tried. WWE's presentation of the female talent is so much better than AEW's, and it's not even close. And I don't mean that to come off as a cheap shot at AEW or anything, but when I see girls like Bianca and Asuka show up on camera, I don't immediately groan and think to myself, oh God, how am I going to get through this one without having to stop to take a leak? I'll actually sit and watch the girls wrestle. And even though I wasn't a fan of everything they did here, in comparison to what I'm used to seeing, this came off like a Mania-level match. Even the Rhea Charlotte match from the night prior had some decent moments in it. I didn't really like the powerbomb spot on the floor that Bianca gave to Asuka, mostly because she just threw Asuka back in the ring and Asuka kicked out like 15 seconds later. A powerbomb spot on the floor should be an injury angle, not something you just randomly throw into the middle of a match and then move on with doing more stuff. I think it was Corey that called this a seesaw match. There's more of your Vince jingoisms for you. He rubbed off on Corey the right way. A seesaw back and forth match, pal. That's such good shit. Yeah, but that was the other thing too. And I thought about this while the match was going on. This is a pretty 50-50 match. I didn't really get the sense that Bianca was really struggling or fighting from underneath at any point. It was more of an, okay, I'm going to do something, and then you're going to hit me with something, and we'll just kind of rotate spots for a while. And those matches work on occasion, but I don't know. I think this match needed a little more story to it. I don't think the people were shocked by Bianca retaining. The crowd was definitely more pro-Asuka than they were Bianca, and that comes with the territory. Smarter crowd. But even when Bianca won at the end, they didn't boo her out of the building or anything. Her deadlifting Asuka onto her shoulders for the KOD at the finish was kind of cool. I mean, she basically rolled through out of an armbar, which took a lot of strength to be able to get Asuka in position for that. But, no. Bianca's really fucking strong. That's kind of her thing. I mean, she's in better shape than most of the AEW male roster. I'm looking at you, Adam Cole. Anyway, Match wasn't anything special. It does sort of leave the window open for what they have next in line for Bianca. At this point, I really don't know who she feuds with on the Raw side of things. I mean, I don't know how much they've exhausted their current talent pool. Who's really left for her to face? They've done her and Asuka. They've done her and Bayley. Her and Becky's been done to death. Really, is there anybody else? Who's currently being developed in NXT right now that would stand a credible chance at going up against Bianca? I mean, I haven't kept tabs on NXT in a hot minute, but the girls I saw down there at one point weren't really lighting the world on fire. They got me stumped there. I don't know. But it's Raw, so I guess I won't have to worry about it until the next premium live special. WrestleMania Backlash, or whatever it's called. So literally within seconds of this match ending, Bianca goes to hold up her title, and immediately my app crashes again. So for the second straight time in the span of about 15 minutes, I had to close and reopen the Peacock app. Because, you know, fill in the blank. How many unique and innovative ways can I flip the bird to Peacock? No. And then, oh boy. Well, we had a segment up next. And I'm glad I stuck around for this roller coaster ride. What an instant WrestleMania classic. You know, sometimes you get those moments that live forever in infamy. The kinds of things that go so horribly wrong and there's just no way to pre-plan any of it. Yet the sheer horrors leave you with nothing but smiles. And I think back to that classic Jade Cargill debut in AEW. Like the kind of bad TV where it exceeds bad and becomes legendary by comparison because you're just laughing your ass off the whole time. Every so often, if I'm having a bad day, I go back to check out that video clip just to relive the moment. This next segment is one of those classic bad moments that left me kicking and rolling by the end. And it started off rotten, because in the ring, we have Snoop Dogg and Miz. Again. And, well, they're just friends again. Even though on the previous night's card, Snoop Dogg booked an impromptu match so The Miz could go out there and get his ass kicked by Pat McAfee in 3 minutes. So, 24 hours later, here they are. They're both chummy again. And they're doing their artificial WrestleMania attendance deal. Somehow they managed to pull in an extra 1,000 or so people from the previous night. And of course, they're trying to do the combined math from night 1 and night 2. And Michael Cole announces one number. Miz gets on the stick seconds later and throws out a completely different number. Because nobody knows how to do mental math. Everybody graduates from the School of Steiner. So, that already had me chuckling. But for the second straight night, Snoop Dogg decided to just be a dick to The Miz. So he booked him in a second impromptu match. And who should be Miz's opponent? But good old Shane O'Mac. He's back, baby. And he's more bloated and winded than ever before. He's doing the long trudge down the aisleway to the ring. Literally looks like he's on the verge of having a convulsion by the time he gets halfway down the aisleway. He's so blown up. And he gets into the ring. And as God is my witness, I'm thinking to myself, no way. They're not actually going to do this, are they? Look at this fucking guy. Dude got tired just walking down the ramp to the ring. How in the fuck is this guy supposed to wrestle a match after being on the shelf for almost an entire year? Actually, it's been over a year, right? Well, we got our answer. We got an answer. The bell rings for this thing. Sorry, I'm really trying to maintain my composure without losing my shit. This took me so long to recover after seeing it. Well, in typical fashion, Shane throws his terrible fake punches to Miz in the corner. They go over to the ropes to literally do the most basic fundamental spot in the fucking book. The kind of thing that you do in training school when you're first learning how to hit the ropes. Headlock, tackle, drop down, leapfrog, hip toss. And Shane O'Mac got about as far as the leapfrog before Miz ducked under. And straight out of the playbook of Sid Vicious, Shane came down and, well, he didn't snap the fucker off the bone like Sid did, but oh my God. I felt so bad. I really did. But this is so fucking hilarious. Shane's on the ground grabbing at his ACL. And they got the camera strategically focused on The Miz, who's just kind of standing in the corner, gritting his teeth and probably thinking to himself, oh dear God, what do I do? And that in and of itself was fantastic. But it is made 10 times better by the audible they called. Fucking Shane's laying there with the doctors hovering over him. Miz is in the corner with dick in hand, having no clue what to do. Snoop Dogg, like, he doesn't know what the fuck's going on here. He's trying to be all calm and cool and collected about it. Meanwhile, there's a guy just laying there grabbing at his knee with all his cartilage torn up. Snoop Dogg's just casually walking around like, man, why you do him dirty like that, Miz? And their first audible in this fiasco was to have Snoop Dogg just sucker punch Miz in the face. Which may or may have not been a shoot. I still don't know. But he cold cocked this motherfucker right in the jaw. And down went the Miz in a heap. At that point I thought, well, could have gone worse. It wasn't the most calculating segment of all time, but they managed to pull it off. But oh no, there was more. What should the female ref Jessica Carr do? But she turns around to Snoop Dogg and she just goes, people's elbow, in front of God and everyone. Clear as day. We hear this on the hard cam. She turns to Snoop Dogg and says, people's elbow. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, oh no. No. Snoop Dogg is not actually going to try a fucking people's elbow drop. Has this guy ever even been trained to run the ropes? Well, we found out. The answer was hell fucking nah. It's straight out of the Jenna Sharmell TNA match. Snoop Dogg goes to hit the ropes. And boy howdy, it was horrible enough to make even Jenna Maraska and Sharmell wince. Gives Miz the elbow. Shane just vanishes into the ether, never to be seen or spoken of again. They fucking blacklisted that guy. They're playing this up like, yep, just as we planned. Nothing to see here, folks. Just Discount everything you saw a minute ago with that geek McMahon that blew out his ACL trying to do a basic fucking leapfrog spot after being out of the ring for over 12 months and probably didn't do any cardio training prior to this segment. But surely he can do it. We have all the faith in the world that Shane O'Mac is going to be able to go out there, wrestle a full match with Miz in 2023. Just like the good old Attitude Era days. Like it's 2001 all over again. This is what fucking Mania moments are made for. Shane took one look at last year's Mania show where Vince took one of the worst stunners of all time and said, "Up yours, Dad. I'm about to create my own legacy tonight, bitch. I'm going to make you regret the day you kicked me out of the company and sent me home. Watch me botch a leapfrog and tear my leg right out of my leg." Oh, what a moment. What a fucking moment. Shane O'Mac. My man. Beautiful stuff. That one. That one right there. I'll be watching that video clip again in my spare time. Don't you fucking forget about that. I'm still laughing about it now. It took me like an hour to regain my composure after that train wreck level of awesome. What will, without a doubt, be the best moment in 2023? No doubt. Nothing will top that moment. And we go from that to this Hell in a Cell match between Edge and Finn Balor, which, albeit, was not a classic WrestleMania moment. It was something, though. That it was. So I'll talk about this first. Kind of like the Ray Dawn match from the night prior. You know, they definitely went all in with the entrances here. I didn't really get the Edge thing with the silver mask, Delia Bob, and the weird metal music they played before he came down. That all kind of went way over my head. But, you know, they advertised this as Finn Balor coming out with the demon gimmick. So that was sort of the attraction piece to this match, I guess. And the fact that it was a cell match. And while I've been actively critical of the Judgment Day group for a long time now, I was at least willing to go along with this idea on paper. Mostly because I was kind of banking on this being the culmination to the story after basically a year of the Judgment Day being a complete non-entity. The cell thing, I mean, okay. You know, I figured it was there so they could ram each other's face into it a few times and use that as their weapon of choice. But oh, how I easily forget the era of wrestling we live in now. Of course, within a matter of literal seconds, after no-selling each other's fake punches in the first 30 seconds of the opening bell, within moments after that, it's to the floor to break out the plunder. God damn it. I actually thought we were going to get through one of these shows without them having to break out the toys. But even the WWE machine is susceptible to this hardcore bullshittery. Breaking out all the fake gimmick kendo sticks, chairs, ladders, tables, the whole gamut. And of course, like clockwork, every time without fail, as soon as the weapons come out, what do the fans immediately go to but the "We want tables" chant? Because that's all the people give a shit about in these kinds of gimmick matches. They don't give a fuck about seeing two guys beat the crap out of each other. They just want to see somebody go through a table. So, the usage of the gimmicks kind of took me out of this thing from the onset. I'm just so sick of the hardcore stuff in wrestling. I'm done with it. I see it so often. It always tunes me out every single time. Guys just infinitely hitting each other with shit and setting up contraption spots so all the people can go, ooh, and ah. Just an endless stream of jackass stunts. So, didn't like that. And albeit it's been a little while, so perhaps I could use a bit of a refresher here, but what is Finn Balor's demon gimmick in 2023? Is he supposed to be the bootleg fiend? Where he just no-sells everything and gets up 5 seconds after being hit with a move? Because I remember watching the Demon Finn Balor in NXT years ago, and even the Demon sold shit a time or two in his matches. Because it was still technically Finn Balor, he was just under a bunch of body paint. Like, the guy could still technically feel pain. I don't know what they're doing with him now. Now they're just trying to replicate their failed Bray Wyatt gimmick from 2 years ago. A gimmick, by the way, that sucked cock. Much like all of Bray's incarnations. But I'll say this. I didn't like the weapon stuff, but Edge and Balor are good enough workers. They're not going to do stupid Jon Moxley-inspired bullshit where they're trying to slice open the other guy's arteries and drink his blood in front of everybody. It is still incredibly stupid to think that in real-life situations you would just randomly have kendo sticks and ladders and tables and trash cans hanging out under the ring. Again, it's the old-timer in me talking, but it's still stupid. But then we get the really stupid part of this match. They get to a deal where Edge throws one of the ladders at Balor's face and basically busts him open hard way. And of course, they have to grind the match to a complete halt so the medical team can go in there and clean up Balor's face of all the blood spewing out of his forehead. Despite the fact that this is retarded because you can't even see the fucking blood anyway. Well, with all the red paint he's got splattered on his face. So who gives a fuck if the guy's bleeding? Can't see the shit anyway. Naturally, the crowd booed that out of the building. You know, all the while Edge is having to stall for time by going out to the floor and throwing a bunch of weapons around. Finally, they resume things after about 2 minutes of dead air time. They end up doing a deal where Edge gave Balor the execution DDT off the ladder in the corner. That got a near fall. That spot where Balor went to give Edge the coup de grace through the table from that elevated platform on the cell and Edge moved out of the way. How in the fuck Balor did not shatter his ankles on that landing? Beyond me. An act of God. Like, he went through that table like melted butter. I thought that guy shattered his kneecaps. Somehow he didn't break anything. That's the spot they should have used with Shane earlier. Then we would have had a real WrestleMania moment worth talking about. Shane McMahon going for the double foot stomp through a table, and the fucking knees are shattered. But I digress. So Edge ends up hitting a spear on Balor, and they end up doing the finish deal where Edge pins Balor on the chair and gives him the concerto deal to the back of the head, kills him dead. 1, 2, 3. So Edge wins. Because, you know, got to get that young generation over. And, well, that's all there really was to it. I mean, I can't even say I hated the match because I really didn't. But I've just been so over this Judgment Day stuff for a long time now. Honestly, it didn't matter what kind of match they came up with for these guys. I knew the premise and the backstory going in. And because it all circles back to the Judgment Day thing, I just didn't care. I mean, looking at the brighter side of things, hopefully with Edge going over, that means this interminable Judgment Day story is dead in the water. Because this thing's been going on since the cavemen learned how to carve letters into rocks. I'm over it. I've been over it. And honestly, at this point, hate to say it, I'm over Edge. I talked about it before, man. They missed their window on him 2 years ago when they decided against putting the belt on him. And I know they were still early into Roman's title run by that point, but if there was ever a point to change plans and call an audible to go with plan B, Edge was the guy to do it with. I might be in the minority, wouldn't be the first time, but his return or comeback to the WWE has been an underwhelming ride. Think about all that buzz and anticipation people had to see him have one last run at the top before he called it quits. This is all he's had to show for it in 3 years. He's just a guy that appears and disappears sporadically. Wrestles here and there, but he's not really factored into anything important. And I like Edge, but at this point, kind of don't want to see him anymore. They had their chance to make his run impactful. They botched it. And now he basically means jack shit in this company. And they have nobody but to blame but themselves. It's bad booking and poor mismanagement of talent. It's also why I still have some reservations about the finish to that main event, because I'm going to circle back to the Edge thing later on. But before we get to that, right before the main event, they took the time to recognize the 2023 Hall of Fame class, which kind of fit into the theme of a lot of modern wrestling content these days. Mid. Seeing Lawler be the guy to induct Andy Kaufman was a pretty major blow to kayfabe. Not that the business hasn't already been exposed. I mean, he was probably the right guy to do it with, but I don't know. Again, disgruntled old wrestling fan talking. It's still real to me, damn it. No, it's not. It was good seeing Stacy Keibler again. I know she was never a particularly great wrestler in her heyday, but tell you, man, in the land of plastic Barbie dolls and artificial Botox injections, Stacy never ages. She was a natural beaut, and she still looks great. Ray obviously being the head of the class was to be expected. Grey Muta was there. We kind of talked about that before. I didn't talk about this, though. The Warrior Award selection for Tim White was kind of weird. I mean, I know the guy died last year, and, obviously that's sad. But, I think I read somewhere that he's going to be the first WWE official to get put into the Hall of Fame class. Really? Tim White? Don't you think that's an honor they could have saved for an Earl or a Dave Hebner or a Nick Patrick? I don't know. Again, nothing against Tim White. I don't remember too much about his officiating in WWE to judge one way or the other. The name was familiar, but he wouldn't have been my first choice as the first referee to induct into WWE's Hall of Fame. That's just all I'm going to say about it. But that was that. The 2023 Hall of Fame class. And at long last, our main event. And what a main event it was. There's plenty to say about this one. Quite frankly, I still haven't really collected my thoughts all that well. I'm sitting here, I'm still trying to think of the best way for me to break down everything that happened, because it was really kind of a double-edged sword. Again, the high production value for the entrances was in full swing here. I did enjoy the 6 fake piano players before Roman's entrance, and you could clearly see the fact that because they were playing on digital keyboards, the screens weren't even on for half of them, so they weren't even really producing any sound, but they tried to sell it like they were actually playing the correct notes. Whoops. Problems when you get musicians watching your wrestling product. And I did notice during Roman's entrance, he came out with Solo and the Wise Man. No Jimmy or Jay, though. Very interesting. Almost like that was an omen for what was to come later on. Yeah, and Cody's entrance was good too. He went over to ringside beforehand. And of course, who should be hanging out at ringside with the kids? But good old Brandy. Oh, how we've missed Brandy. She was sort of a non-factor in all this by the end, but the sight of her on camera, I was like, oh boy, how are they going to get her involved in this? Is she going to make a run-in at the end? Probably the funniest part of the match for me was the line right at the beginning where Michael Cole goes, and if you look at the tattoo across Cody's chest, it says, Dream, which signifies a tribute to his dad. At which point I thought he was going to follow up by saying, and if you look at the other tattoo on Cody's neck, well, there's no story there. I think Cody just fucked up. But hey, we all go through a midlife crisis at some point, right? And I really thought they missed a golden opportunity with Brandy here, man. They had their chance in another WrestleMania Classic, and they blew it. And it was so fucking simple. All we needed was for Paul Heyman to get on the mic, do the regular introductions for the tribal chief like he normally does, and then right as Paul Lee is getting to the good stuff, Brandy hops the guardrail, hits the ring, snatches the stick from Heyman's hand and goes, "Who told you it was open mic night, bitch?" And that right there, that would have made Brandy the instant biggest babyface in WWE. Barred none. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. Nor did we get a Paul Lee promo. It was kind of weird, actually. Roman did his acknowledge me shtick to the SoFi crowd, and they pretty much rang the bell to start this thing immediately. You know, instead, Roman did the acknowledge me shtick to the SoFi crowd. They pretty much rang the bell to start this thing immediately. No wasted time, no bells and whistles. And of course, Cody and Roman are right there for the stare down at the beginning, waiting to see which one would crack first. And they actually held frame for quite a bit of time. I think Roman was the first one to smile before they actually locked up. And here's what I'll say about this match. How you judge or rate this is really going to be dependent on how you feel about the finish. I have a lot of mixed bag opinions about it. I'm not going to say the finish hindered my opinion of the match one way or another, because the jury's still kind of out on whether or not it was the correct decision. You know, time will ultimately tell if it was the right call, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. As a match, in terms of the way they structured and laid this thing out from start to finish, fucking great. Not just great, but fucking great. It was well-paced. Both guys took their time and really milked the big key spots. The crowd took a little time to warm up to Cody. Like, there was a period at the beginning there where you could audibly hear the anti-Cody portion of the arena. They were just really drowning out Cody with the boos. And again, smarter crowd. You know, the hardcores are more boisterous and vocal this time of year, so that was to be expected. But by the end of this thing, credit to him where it's due, Cody had the people eating out of the palm of his hand. And Paul Heyman was awesome on the floor, playing cheerleader for Roman. what did he say at one point to Roman? You're the relevant one. He's yours for the taking. Now smash him. I'm just like, God, he's great. And again, early on, they kept things really basic. Cody getting the early shine and overwhelming Roman. Roman kind of planting the seed of doubt. They ended up spilling out to the rampway early on, but, the floor brawling didn't overstay its welcome. They kept it moving. And that was basically done so Solo could run in from behind and catch Cody in the ribs with a folding chair. So that was one of the main stories they had played up for the majority of the match. Roman could get the heat, he could work the ribs, and Cody would have an injury to fight through. And about a minute or two later, they have Solo trip up Cody when he tries to run the ropes. For the second straight time behind the official's back, Solo was able to catch Cody off guard while he wasn't paying attention. And again, Cody's favoring the injured ribs by now, but he still has the ability to fight through and stay on the advantage. Again, they're going a long time here, so they're not trying to go to all the big spots immediately. They're trying to build up the stuff, which is good. They end up doing the big table bump on the floor where Cody backdrops Roman through the desk. People pop big for that. Cody desperately tries to throw Roman back in the ring to get the pin, but only gets an ear fall when he's able to hit Roman with the cutter. And at that point, you can start to see the desperation kick in a little bit more with Cody. They wind up doing a great angle where Cody catches Roman with a suicide dive on the floor. And when he goes back to get on the ring apron, wham! Here's Solo from behind to whip him in the back with a weight belt. And this time, the ref hears it. He catches Cody rolling into the ring, holding his back. Solo's on the floor trying to look on innocently. And the ref looks at him. He does the big wind up and goes, "You're out of here." And everyone, of course, goes nuts for that. And that led to a great false finish where Roman tried to use the belt, but the ref got into a tug of war with him to try and snatch it away. Cody ended up hitting Roman with the super kick, followed that with a crossroads for a great 2 count. Another false finish where the people were on the edge of their seats. Eventually, Roman was able to thwart Cody and lock him in the guillotine choke. A rare instance in wrestling where a guy was in a submission hold and the people were actually rallying for Cody to stay alive and fight through it. And of course, that led perfectly into Cody trying to catch Roman with a clothesline after he broke free, but he ends up cold cocking the official. So he goes down in a heap and rolls out to the floor. They do the double down spot where Cody and Roman are laying on the mat. Ample opportunity for who to run in but the Usos. Sneaking in the back door and gang assaulting Cody. They're stomping on him. They're trying to beat him into powder so Roman could walk away with the easy win. But who should be out to make the save to an electric pop but Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens? Here they come to the aid of their friend Cody. They end up throwing the Usos out to the floor. And yes, my common complaint now with every brawl in modern wrestling, yes, they fought off. They just brawled into the crowd and never returned. And that actually was kind of unfortunate because if you think about some of the key pops throughout the course of this match, remove all the false finishes and near falls for a second. What was the one single thing in this match that got the biggest ovation? The spot that got the biggest reaction out of everything that happened here. I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was Sami hitting Roman with the haluva kick in the corner. When the people saw that, boom goes the dynamite. Everybody leapt up to their feet with excitement. And I just thought, boy, wouldn't that have been a great moment to take the match home. Owens and Zayn hit their finishers on Roman. They dispose of the Usos. They powder. Cody goes over and hits the crossroads on Roman. 1, 2, 3. New champion. All is right with the world. God, can you imagine what a great finish that would have been? Well, we didn't get that. Instead, Roman kicked out of another pinfall attempt, and they kept going for a while longer. We did get Cody breaking out the bionic elbow spot. People like that. And that took us to our finishing sequence. And this is where some of my reservations may come into play here, but I'll cover the details first and then I'll go into my analysis. So Cody gives Roman 2 consecutive crossroads, and right as he's going in for the third, Paul Lee hits the ring apron to take the official so that Solo Sikoa can sneak in from the crowd, gives Cody the spike in the corner, and at that point, Roman hits the ropes, spear on Cody, 1, 2, 3. And the air is immediately sucked out of the room as WWE pans their cameras to all the disappointed, shocked people in the crowd. People are shaking their heads. They're audibly groaning. And, I thought long and hard about this, especially after seeing everything that went down here. The one thing I kept coming back to, we talk a lot about the dusty finish in wrestling and how it gets a bad rap from fans because of how overused it's been throughout history. But I just kept thinking to myself here, especially after the ref clearly saw Solo out there again after he was already ejected earlier on. Wouldn't this have been a great time for a dusty finish? Like Roman gets the visual pin on Cody, but the ref sees Solo standing there afterwards and says, "Wait a minute, motherfucker. I just kicked you out of ringside earlier. What the hell are you doing back out here again? No, I know you got involved. Fuck you. We're reversing this decision. Cody wins." And you think to yourself, what better time to do a rare dusty finish in modern wrestling than with the son of the American Dream himself in the main event of WrestleMania? I mean, if there was ever a time to do it, just saying. And yeah, there are definitely downfalls and pitfalls in booking a finish like that, as there are with a lot of things. Instantly everybody's going to go to the Lex Luger SummerSlam 93 argument, and I get it. We literally just reviewed that pay-per-view on the channel last year, and it was still a bad decision in hindsight to have Luger win that match by countout but not actually walk out with the title. Would the same thing hold true for this match with Cody? If he beat Roman by DQ but didn't actually walk out with the belt? Would it have hurt him? No. In some cases, debatably yes. But think about this too. When was the last time that Roman lost a match? Under any circumstance. Pinfall, submission, DQ, countout. It's been over 2 years, right? Even if the plan was for Cody to not walk out with the title on this show, the original game plan, there were still ways to protect him by the end by having Cody get one over on Roman. Because then he could say, well, yeah, Cody didn't walk out with a strap, but he left Roman with a tainted loss. Technically, it still goes down in the record book as a reverse decision. So Roman still winds up with a loss for the first time in years. Then you really have a case for a rematch down the road to get a decisive winner. And Cody has an added story to hold over Roman's head in the meantime. Again, that's just my creative juices flowing. All in all, I'm not saying that Cody losing this match was a bad decision or even the wrong decision. I'm just thinking that with the way it was done, with the way they executed the entire finishing sequence here, perhaps a questionable decision. If the Bloodline story is going to continue and Cody is still going to be factored into the title equation, there are still ways to carry this out to SummerSlam if they're careful. But then again, I go back to everything I said in that WrestleMania preview. If they didn't wind up putting the belt on Cody here, but they still wanted to drag the story out longer and wait to put the belt on Cody at a later date, would it still have the same impact? How would the fans respond? Would they still have enough faith or believability in Cody to see him finally beat Roman for the belt? Or are we going to look back in history and recount this moment as a Lex Luger 93 scenario? Is this Vince saying, nah, pal, we gotta wait. We gotta really pull at the people's heartstrings and get them really itching to see that title switch later? Because that's such good shit. And as we found out with Luger, later didn't necessarily mean good booking call. Sure, we can speak in hypotheticals. Hypothetically, you could stretch out the Cody story for 6 to 8 months. That's a long time to be testing the fans' patience. After all the time we waited for Cody to make his comeback and get healthy to wrestle again, beating him like this? I mean, you sort of gave him an outing with the fucked finish, but I don't know, dude. It's still chalked up as a pinfall victory for Roman. And what do you do with Cody in the meantime? Is WWE's creative team smart enough to come up with ways to keep Cody strong on television in the lead up to a potential title rematch? In this generation? I don't know. And while they could always change course and decide, yeah, let's do Gunther and Cody for the IC title, and let's put the IC title on Cody. Have him be the one to dethrone Gunther after his long title reign. Then, you could build like a title versus title winner-take-all match sometime next year with Cody and Roman. Okay, again, yeah, you could do that. But that's a long time to be milking people's patience. We live in a very unique time. It's the TLDR instant gratification world we live in now. The reality is people just don't have a lot of patience to wait to see how things play out. Not after getting jerked around with WWE's creative team for the better part of the last decade plus. I mean, we really salivate and crave for the good babyface moments. The moments where the babyface actually gets his in the end. I don't know. And where does that leave Roman in terms of fresh opponents? Because we talked about this too in the preview. Who else is there for this motherfucker to face? He's literally beaten everybody there is to beat. Everybody but fucking God. And even then, I still wouldn't bet odds that God could beat Roman. I don't see how they stretch this Roman title reign out any longer and keep it interesting. I really don't. Cody kind of needed this win. And again, I can't say for a fact that this was the right or wrong booking call. It's all subject to opinion. People are obviously going to be pissed about it. I wouldn't say that. I'm not angry or miffed about the decision. But I'm concerned about it. I'm certainly questioning it. Roman's great. He's been great with all the Bloodline stuff. But even I have to admit, the story is starting to feel like a shit or get off the pot scenario. There really isn't anywhere else to go unless Roman kicks the Usos out of the group and turns on them. Then maybe it builds to something with a Solo Sikoa being the guy to challenge Roman for the belt later on as a babyface. Again, those are viable options. And while there is story implication there, man, really? You all buying Solo Sikoa is the guy to beat Roman for the belt? Ugh. I mean, Solo's good. He's got a bright future in this business, but is that really a fitting payoff after all the investment into Roman's title run? Having Solo be the guy to beat him? That's going to be a hard sell. I mean, I'd buy a Braun Breaker going over Roman for the title before Solo Sikoa would. Braun's had a much better run and shows a lot more potential in the interim. Solo's still very green, man. He needs a lot more time to hone his craft in the business. And again, hypothetically speaking, if they say, well, change of plans, we're going to have Solo be the guy to beat Roman for the belt, how long do we have to wait for that? A year? Year and a half? What happens if Roman can't carry the title that long? WWE's been really lucky, and I think we're all taking this for granted right now. Think about all of the injuries that have been sustained in wrestling over the last 10 plus years. All the high-risk, dangerous stuff these guys put themselves through in matches. Guys get hurt a lot more often than we're used to taking into account. Roman's been one of those guys that stayed healthy through thick and thin. He's never been hurt. He's been there. He's been able to do all the business he's been put in front of. So, like I said, WWE has been very, very lucky in all of this. But anything can happen. One moment, Roman could be in there doing a program and dislocates an elbow, torques an ankle, shatters an ACL. Again, you never know. Things happen in professional wrestling. It's a very dangerous sport, as you'll constantly hear people talk about. And I'm worried that something might come up where Roman has to unexpectedly drop the belt. And that throws everything out the window in terms of what they've been building up in this Bloodline story. I mean, they were fortunate enough to get Roman all the way to this point. Now that they're going to continue his title reign, it's like, okay, it's a very risky move. It's a bold move. I hope nothing happens. I'm willing to stick the course. I'm willing to see what they do or what the eventual game plan is. But again, I'm just going by record here. Injuries are easily sustainable in this business, and especially with where we are in the modern era. Guys are doing a lot of really, really dangerous things now. So, anything can happen. That's all I'm saying. You know, Roman's a smart worker, but even he's not invulnerable. But all in all, it was a great title match, great bit of storytelling, with a somewhat concerning, to-be-determined finish outcome. If it all lends itself to being a satisfying finish, maybe with Roman finally dropping the belt to Cody at SummerSlam, or, again, they decide to go in a completely different creative direction, there are options, but for where we are right now, I'm a little hesitant. I'm still calling this one into question. But overall, for both nights, I thought WrestleMania 39 delivered. It was a fun two-night event. You know, not every match was good, but we got everything you could possibly want out of a Big Four card. Some great matches, some great moments, classic Mania moments that will forever live in the highlight reel. And of course, the train wreck level comedy we get once in a blue moon. The kind of good shit you couldn't book if you tried. That's always the best form of comedy. When things don't go according to plan, but you still make the most out of them. Shane McMahon came through for us this year. So I had a fun time. Yeah, the show was long. It was interminably long at times. Not the greatest WrestleMania of all time, but certainly not the worst. I was kind of putting this one off. After they hyped the lineup for this week's card, and I saw that one of the featured matches for this week's Raw was going to be Atom Bomb versus Earthquake in a WrestleMania rematch, no less. I was like, well, I do have to mow the lawn. Basically trying to come up with any excuse to delay having to watch this one. Then the reality quickly set in that I also had to watch 2 back-to-back nights of WrestleMania. So if I tried putting this off until Sunday, it basically meant that I was going to have to subject myself to like 9 hours of wrestling in a 24-hour window. And I don't think my nervous system would have been able to handle that. So I gutted this one through on Saturday afternoon, late afternoon, right before I got everything set up to watch the first night of WrestleMania. I mean, I basically treated it like I was watching pre-show material. And, boy, this one felt like a pre-show. Take the opening match as an example. The Atom Bomb Earthquake rematch. You know, the match they originally had at the WrestleMania show that went less than a minute. The one match on that card we looked at and wondered, why the hell is this happening on WrestleMania? Well, apparently some brain trust thought that after the show was over, out of all the matches we saw at WrestleMania 10, what's the one match that everybody would want to see again? Oh, I know. Earthquake versus Atom Bomb. Now that's such good shit. You know, call me crazy. Might be going out on a limb here. I think I may know who the culprit was that signed off on that rematch. Call it a hunch, but a couple key names come to mind. And whereas the WrestleMania match was both harmless and inoffensive, because it was so short, this was both harmful and offensive because they actually gave this one fucking time. Got 5 minutes and change. And it was rotten beyond all hope. Earthquake, a.k.a. John Tenta, was about as competent in the ring as he could be for a guy that size, but he sure as fuck wasn't King Kong Bundy or Paul White. He was an okay big man athlete. And then you put him in there with Atom Bomb, who on his best day looked like a guy wrestling with 2 left feet. You know, this is the kind of match where when WWF critics talk about how bad this era was because of all the constant big guy matches, this is the poster child for defending that argument. I mean, more so, this match was more about continuing the completely random on-screen beef with Harvey Whippleman and Howard Finkel. Yeah, remember from the WrestleMania segment? They spent like half the time having Harvey try to belittle the Fink for some unknown reason. Oh, here, they had Harvey get confrontational with him again in his leopard necktie, no less, which made the whole thing that much more absurd. Earthquake won with a seated splash, and my conclusion note reads, if the goal was to give off the impression that these were 2 natural disasters colliding with one another, no pun intended with the gimmick there, then mission accomplished. This was indeed an earthquake followed by a major bomb. Because this match bombed worse than Hiroshima. Thankfully, they got in and out before causing my eyes to bleed. And that was followed with a VTR of the Yokozuna Lex Luger title match from WrestleMania, where Mr. Perfect done and gone done did Luger dirty. And Basically Luger did a pre-taped interview where he called out Mr. Perfect and told him that he can't wait until Hennig gets out of the suit so Luger can get a piece of him. No. Keep counting your blessings, Luger, because that suit ain't coming off for a long, long time. I think we already kind of covered this story fallout, but you know how we always talk about how retrospective reviews kind of paint certain different things in different perception? Well, by this point, they were still running on the theory that Curt Hennig was going to get back in the ring and be healthy enough to wrestle again. Unfortunately, as we eventually come to learn, that didn't end up happening. They were really pushing this program hard coming out of Mania. And it's just another cut and dry case of Luger drawing the short end of the straw. The hits just keep on coming for that poor fucker in the WWF. Loses his WWF Championship rematch, and their next big planned program for him after Mania and the lead into the summer. And it basically gets shot in the foot before it ever has a chance to get off the ground. Speaking of Mr. Perfect, though, he was out there with Gorilla Monsoon for an interview. Also forgot to mention that at the top of the program, but Monsoon was back with Vince to do color on this show. It's been a while since we've seen Gorilla Monsoon on TV in any capacity. I think the last thing we saw with him, he was pushing Bobby Heenan out the back door and throwing out his luggage with him. But he was pursuing the role of interviewer here, basically running Mr. Perfect up the flagpole for his actions at WrestleMania. It says that WWF management thought long and hard about bringing in Hennig as one of the special guest referees because he was a man of integrity. But when he decided to go into business for himself and not count Yokozuna down for the pinfall, it brought light to the idea that Hennig clearly had a grudge against Luger. And of course, Hennig denies all of that, says that he called the match perfectly. Lol. He's doing a great job with the CNN level coverage of everything that happened in that title match, all from a one-sided, slanted point of view. He's talking about how Luger was the one that dragged the managers into the ring, which we all know is an obvious fib. Says that Luger touched Hennig's shoulder not once but twice, and all Hennig could do was go by the rule book. And if the people have a problem with the call, then maybe it's the people with the problem, and not Curt Hennig. He did have a Freudian slip in here where he meant to say that he was being unbiased in his officiating, but he ended up saying biased instead. See, as it turns out, even Mr. Perfect wasn't a master of the English language. Even the perfect man has his off days. But the conclusion to this segment was great. Perfect Gorilla Monsoon delivery. He goes, "Well, sir, the back of your jacket may say Mr. Perfect, but by the time Luger gets finished with you, the front of your shirt is going to say, Made in the USA. And I thought by the end of this, great interview, great heel promo, great back and forth with Monsoon and Hennig. Sucks that it all ended up being for naught. And then following that, we had Razor Ramon and Austin Steele in a quick squash, with the highlight of the segment being Razor throwing a toothpick at Tony Chimmel's face. Underrated ring announcer that Tony Chimmel was. I miss that guy. But Razor beat him up for a few minutes, ended up going over with the Razor's Edge. Vince directed our attention to the fact that the next program was going to be Razor versus Diesel for the IC title, to which I then thought, I bet you Vince regretted that booking decision for the rest of his life. Gotta be careful with the guys you have do business together. Sometimes it ends up biting you in the ass. You know, Vince probably thought to himself at the time, oh yeah, pal, it's Razor Ramon versus Diesel. Those are two giant behemoths squaring off in the ring. What more could you ask for? Then, of course, not realizing that Nash and Hall would end up becoming a little too acquainted for their own good. Of course, you throw Shawn Michaels into the camp, and it just spells bad news all around. But that's all fun material for us to rant about in the next couple years. The curtain call is going to be interesting, if and when we have that discussion. For now, though, let's move on. God, it feels like we've been talking about this program for an hour now. We're barely halfway through the show. They had a quick, goofy little pre-tape with the Quebecers and Johnny Polo in the back, hyping up one of those WWF hotline voting polls, where the fans are going to get to decide who the Quebecers defend their tag belts against next week. Here are their options. The Bushwhackers, Men on a Mission, and the Smoking Guns. You know, oddly enough, it's funny. There appears to be a secret fourth option. If you star 84 your vote, I think you can bypass everything and get to the piss break option. Interesting how that works. Of course, I'm being facetious. I did like the punchline at the end where Johnny Polo called Vince McMahon Vic. That was amusing. Notice how in all of this, though, none of the options for fan voting showed the head shrinkers. It's obviously a story detail from last week where Captain Lou Albano chose the head shrinkers as a team that could possibly go up to face the Quebecers for the belts, seeing as how they voluntarily accepted any and all comers, with the exception of the head shrinkers, apparently, because, you know, they're cowards. So we'll see how this goes. I smell a ruse coming. If I know anything about WWE when it comes to the fans getting to vote for matches or stipulations, it usually turns out those votes are meaningless. So we'll see if they pull a fast one on us. I am kind of hoping for a swerve, because out of the three options they are currently giving us right now, all three of those sound like hideous pairings. I think I'd rather staple gun my tongue to the roof of my mouth. Oh, and speaking of the head shrinkers, they were out for this next match. On the topic of WrestleMania rematches from earlier on, y'all remember that pre-planned 10-man tag that they had to scrap at the last minute because of time constraints? Well, they did it here. It wasn't a rematch, though. It's the Head Shrinkers, Rick Martel, IRS, and Jeff Jarrett versus the Smoking Guns, the 1-2-3 Kid, Tatanka, and Sparky Plug, Bob Holly. My God, those names. Literally the epitome of let's take every bad mid-card gimmick on our roster and shoehorn them all together in one match. This is mid-90s cartoon era professional wrestling in its finest. Doesn't get any worse than Sparky Plug. Forgot all about that gimmick. I don't even remember the last time they booked Bob Holly to work on this show. Basically what we had here was a tale of two stories. You look at the list of names that were a part of this, you essentially had two classes of athletes working here. You had the competent, good professional wrestlers that knew what they were doing in the ring, and then you had the greener than goose shit guys that totally looked out to lunch for the majority of it. Luckily, they were smart enough to keep the more experienced guys in there to do most of the work. I think Billy and Bart were in there for a subtotal of 1 minute, and they tagged out and never tagged in for the remainder of the match. And after some moderately dull action, it ended up breaking down with all 10 guys, and they just randomly decided collectively in the last minute to get into a Pier 6 brawl. And while Earl Hebner is just standing there watching everybody fight on the floor, the 1-2-3 Kid misses a charge in the corner with his boot, basically crotches himself on the top rope, and then IRS rolls him up for the cradle, gets the pin. Didn't even really need to cheat. He just stacked him up and won. And by the time it was all over, I thought, I think I see why they cut this from the Mania card. Because that was indeed a TV match. It was a clusterfuck is what it was. But let us get to the real highlight of the show this week. Vince passingly mentioned this earlier, but God, I totally forgot about this. Funny too, how often do I constantly joke about the trope of everybody in WWE having their own talk segment? Bet you all probably forgot that at one point, Shawn Michaels had his own talk segment. The Heartbreak Hotel. I forgot all about that, dude. It's been years. With the fucking heart-shaped bed and the hooker leg lamp. Straight out of the Christmas Story gag. And, well, if anybody was made for a talk show, Shawn Michaels was one of those dudes. He made all the submissive remarks about the Heartbreak Hotel being closed for vacancies. He mentioned something about how there will be no pilfering of towels or 5-fingering of ashtrays. And if anybody is caught disturbing the peace, they'll have to deal with Big Daddy Cool, Diesel. It's made even better by Vince in the most uncool manner possible, restating Big Daddy Cool. And his delivery legitimately sounded like the way your lame white uncle would say that phrase. Just cringe. But he basically did a roundabout promo until he got to the main point. He issued the challenge for the IC title on behalf of Diesel, a match that they already kind of clued us into earlier. And that was pretty much the entirety of the segment. Diesel wants an IC title match. More so he could bring the belt back to the Heartbreak Hotel. Translation, hand the belt over to Shawn, because he can't get the job done himself. It is one of those things where if you acknowledge the fact that Shawn's delivery was very good, you can look past all the oversaturated production details of the way WWF always did these kinds of segments. I've talked about it before. I personally never liked the talk show gimmick in wrestling. I think it's dumb. I always have. Even the guys that were great at cutting promos, the nature of the talk show thing in wrestling just gave it way too much of a Jimmy Kimmel or Conan O'Brien spinoff feel. Like that sports entertainment presentation bullshit that I always bark about ruining professional wrestling. But Vince was a sucker for these kinds of things. This is the form of wrestling he always liked. So I get it. But the whole production aspect of it always comes off so overdone. So artificial. The fucking harp-shaped bed and the leg lamp. The hotel sign in the background with the curtain draped over it. I'm like, isn't this all a little bit overkill? Do we really need to overexert the production to this level? It's a flavor that some people will like if you watch WWF your entire life, but again, the sports entertainment part of the presentation that just rubs me the wrong way. For the kind of wrestling I grew up watching, this stuff just never clicked with me. But that took us to the final segment, albeit not as memorable as the debut of the Heartbreak Hotel. It's Yokozuna versus Scott Powers. And this is our first time seeing Yokozuna without possession of the WWF Championship. Obviously, he dropped the belt to Bret at Mania. We just covered that in the last WrestleMania review. And it's just kind of a way to get Yoko a win back on TV. It was... it's interesting. Timely enough as I'm talking about this right now, I think they just aired one of those A&E documentaries on Yokozuna. I never watched those autobiographies, but for some reason this one caught my attention when I saw the promotional thing for it on YouTube somewhere. Might go out of my way to try to check that out if I can. But when it comes to Yoko, we've been focusing so much on Luger's decline after WrestleMania 10. I guess I sort of neglected to remember how Yokozuna kind of followed in the same tracks. The decline was just a little less steep than Luger's was. Because Yoko doesn't end up leaving the WWF until, 97, I think? He ends up sticking around for a couple more years, but he really does just kind of fade into the background. He gets relegated to mid-card status. He certainly doesn't end up with another title push at any point. They really kind of threw Yoko on the back burner after he dropped the belt to Brett. I know it's kind of easy to forget about that, but, Yoko is still around the company for a couple more years, but they really don't get a lot of usage out of him. He does the tag team thing with Owen a little bit later on, but that's still a little ways down the road. I remember the Survivor Series program for him later this year, but I completely what they got the guy doing in the meantime. Of course, all the stuff blurs together so much over the years. But I just thought about that watching this match, man. The unfortunate deterioration of Yokozuna. And obviously, everybody's talked about it to death, but the health thing, it got significantly worse for him here. And, my God. You think he's huge now. Just wait until the last 2 or 3 years he's in the company before they force him out. It's not good. I can tell you that much. But, that was your Retro Raw. Really not a whole lot to take away from that one, but that was an easy viewing experience for me. I just collected some brief notes and on with the next one. You know what they say, Raw rolls on. That indeed it does. And hopefully I did not bore anybody into a coma with this one. I know this is a very long show, and I appreciate y'all taking the ride with me. WrestleMania 39 is officially in the books. We wait and see what the follow-up's going to be. What did they say the next premium live event was? It was WrestleMania Backlash, right? Well, here's one for 2022, but I don't want that one. Let's see if the wiki page is updated. Backlash, here we go. Well, they got a poster for it featuring Bad Bunny. So it looks like he's going to be factored into the equation. May 6th. That is the date. San Juan, Puerto Rico, which is a very interesting location. We'll see what they do. And then after that, we got the King and Queen of the Ring tournament. Sorry, I'm just browsing. Probably can do this off screen, though. All right. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. Got a lot of editing to do in the meantime, so I'm going to try to piece this together as quickly as I can and get it up for the world to see. So make sure you stop back and check out the Friday show. We'll have the Dynamite Report in store, and we'll get the continuation of Crockett Cup and the continuation of Crockett Promotions as we draw closer to the 87 Crockett Cup. And then we'll also be talking about World Class Championship Wrestling. So we'll be back then. Thanks all for watching. Take care. Peace out.